guess we're ready to begin. Good evening. Welcome to the National Press Club. I'm Jan King. I'm on the Book and Author Committee, and we're so honored tonight to have as our guest Michael Brown. He'll be speaking to you all about his book, Deadly Indifference, The Perfect Political Storm. Copies of the book are available for purchase over there where Nicole is sitting, and each sale benefits the Eric Friedheim National Journalism Library. No outside books will be allowed, please. And Mr. Brown will be signing your copy after he gives his little talk here, so he'll be happy to do that for you. And before I begin, please turn your cell phones off, which means I have to turn mine off too. Okay. And there's two events coming up at the National Press Club I want to announce. June 23rd, Thursday night, we're going to have Neil Gaiman. He has his book, American Gods, the 10th anniversary edition, and this will be a ballroom event. And on August 1st, we will have Senator Bob Graham. He'll be discussing his keys to the kingdom in the conference rooms. I'm sure you all know that our guest, Michael Brown, served as the first Undersecretary of Homeland Security for President George W. Bush from 2003 to 2005. He was also Director, Deputy Director, and General Counsel of FEMA from 2001 to 2005. At the White House, he served on the Consequence Management Committee, comprised of cabinet deputies following the attacks of 9/11, and headed the White House Transition Team for Emergency Preparedness and Response, Department of Homeland Security. He also served on the National Security Council's Deputies Committee. Also, he is an Oklahoma native, and he attended the University of Central Oklahoma, the Oklahoma City University School of Law, and holds a Juris Doctorate in law. He has taught law at the Oklahoma City University and University of Denver on legislation, state and local government, and national security. In his book, Deadly Indifference, co-authored by Ted Schwartz, Michael Brown poignantly describes the role of politics in a risk-aversion society facing natural or man-made disasters. In his book, you will read many excerpts from a journal Mr. Brown maintained when he was working for President George W. Bush. Eventually, his journal reached several hundred pages, and he thought that one day his wife and possibly his children or his grandchildren would read it, and they would come to understand why he agreed to take a job that took him so frequently away from home. Whatever the case, he intended to keep the entries private. But 4 years after leaving the Bush White House, he used them in writing of this book, Deadly Indifference. Mr. Brown says that Hurricane Katrina was a disaster on many levels. Every participant has his own version of the almost heroic personal actions taken in a desperate race to beat the storm, protect the people, and then ultimately blame FEMA. He feels that most people do not know what should have happened and that there were many self-serving spin books written in the aftermath. But Mr. Brown believes that people don't know the planning that was involved or the options available and rejected by high officials whose frequent indecision and occasional bad choices changed a serious situation into a needlessly deadly one. Secondly, he talks in the book about the lack of available documentation during Katrina, but I'm going to let Michael Brown explain all that to you because he is the author of this book and he knows it a lot more than I do. So please give me a warm press club welcome for Michael Brown.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming out. I appreciate it. I was just thinking that Janet, you were talking. One of the things that struck me that I really hadn't thought about for a while in terms of this book, between your introduction and some of the people who are in this room, there's another story that hasn't been told that probably needs to be told about Katrina. And that's all of the people. I heard this come up the other day in I forget who asked me the question, but another reporter asked me the question, and then Ray Nagin was on the Today Show yesterday in an interview with Matt Lauer when this question came up again about race. And how did race and social economics affect what took place in Katrina? And I'm astounded that that issue still comes up when you think about the men and the women who work for the Federal Emergency Management Agency and DHS, and for that matter, the entire federal government. Now, I know if you take X number, I don't know what the number in DHS is now. When I left, it was 180,000 people. So I'm sure now it's at least 200,000, right? That's just the nature of government. But I'll tell you something. That population within DHS is no different than the general population. And I'm sure somewhere in that general population, or in that specific population of DHS, there might be a bigot. There might be somebody who is thinking racially, I don't want to help those people, or I don't want to do this, or they're poor and stupid, or I mean, I can just imagine all the bigoted kinds of things that someone like that might be saying. But what we forget is that those civil servants go down to do a job, and they do it without respect to the politics, to the racial background, to the socioeconomic background, or anything else of the people involved in that crisis. And that's something that as I think about some of you that I see here today, and I think about Matt Lauer asking that question of Ray Nagin yesterday, then I say shame on all of us. Shame on all of us for allowing that to continue to be an issue when this government or our society responds to a disaster. Now, I don't want to place any sort of de minimis attitude toward that and say, let's just blow it off. I mean, let's be realistic. One of the problems that we had in Hurricane Katrina was something that was exposed, I think, for the first time to everybody in this country. And it is a society where it's not like all of you smart people in this room. You got here by metro. You drove your car. I flew in today. I'll fly out tomorrow. I've got enough cash. I'm not going to tell you where it is. I have enough cash that if there's an attack tonight or tomorrow, I know I'll be able to go to Hertz or somebody, and I'll be able to negotiate a deal to get a car, and I'll be able to somehow have enough cash to be able to buy gas to be able to get back to Denver. But when you are of a group that your life revolves around a 4-block area, and you are totally dependent upon public transportation, you are totally dependent upon that little grocery store that's at the end of the block, the school's 2 blocks over this way, and the church or the synagogue is 4 blocks the other way. Even if the mayor had ordered an evacuation of New Orleans within the recommended 72 hours prior to it making landfall, asking those folks to somehow get outside of that comfort zone and go to an area where somebody was going to pick them up on a bus and take them to Huey Long and put them on a 757 or put them on an Amtrak train and take them to Houston or take them to Atlanta or somewhere else would be like asking any of us to leave this room and go to Mars. But recognizing that fact of those folks who are in that situation is not racist. And recognizing that we have a segment of this population that is how their lives are lived is not racist. That's simply a recognition of the complex population that we have in this country, and that sometimes government leaders fail to recognize that asking somebody to do something is asking them something that's out of the extraordinary for them. So I don't know, it was seeing you guys and thinking about all the work that all of you did during Katrina that made me think about that, coupled with seeing that interview with Matt Lauer yesterday. There was a time in 1995, I had just given a speech outside San Diego, California. It was on April 18th. And the next morning I got up and went to the hotel restaurant to have breakfast, and I noticed on the monitors in the hallway that there was some story about an explosion. I didn't pay much attention to it. Walked back and realized that it was in Oklahoma City. And then I realized that it was the Murrah building. This is now on April 19th. So I went back to my room and I tried to call a good friend of mine who's now a retired federal district judge. Couldn't reach Tim. He was in the federal courthouse across the alley from the Murrah building. tried to call my good friend